Choujin X chapter 43. Now, if I had to call this one, this most definitely has to be the final and concluding chapter for volume 7, which goes back to, like I said, this shit gonna be thick. And before I even get to the subject matter of the chapter, I gotta just say shout out to Sweet Ishida, because look, every single review, every single chapter, analysis, breakdown, whatever you want to call it, I have to say this man's first and last name. Like, there's no other manga on the planet that I have to do that for, bro. Like, this is the best new gen manga that is out, criminally underrated, you know. And I know they say that about other new gen mangas, but like, bro, let's be real. It's this, and then there's everything else. And as stated earlier, I do believe that this is the last chapter of volume 7, because narratively it felt more like a conclusion more than a new beginning, especially the way we're hit with that cliffhanger. So I think the next chapter will actually begin volume 8. Whereas with chapter 43, we are given the route of Tokyo and AZUMA being back on speaking terms, as well as the conclusion for the opium reconnaissance mission. Now, the main points I want to touch on for this chapter analysis are, of course, AZUMA, who I feel is the star for this chapter. And the next thing is what I could only describe as the level of awareness shown by Sui Ishida when you account for the relationship between the illustrations, the occurring moment, and the reader. And this is the main thing that separates Choujin X from being another fast food two-dimensional manga ruled solely by its plot. Now, our first moment comes when Momoma drops this statement on AZUMA. To set this up, AZUMA is just coming off a fight with Ellie, where he then says, "I wanted Tokyo to actually talk to me once he got back. Am I really the one in the wrong?" Momoma flat out replies, "I think you are 100% wrong," right? And reading this in real time, it creates this effect where you're like, did she really just say that to AZUMA? Because we know AZUMA as a person who doesn't really take criticism well, or probably hasn't even been criticized too much in his whole life. You know, he's a character who thrives on trying to prevent making mistakes. On top of that, this is a situation where you would kind of expect AZUMA to be consoled by Momoma or Simon, but she just comes out of left field, and you can tell by the blackout of this panel, as well as Simon's face, who kind of goes along with the way we felt when reading what just happened. And one time just wasn't enough, because she doubled down on the boy AZUMA. And at that point, I'm just thinking to myself, Momoma must have a death wish, because in the back of our minds, we know AZUMA has that anger issue, and we remember the Moon Beast chapter when he went berserk on top of that rooftop. We then enter the moment where Momoma encounters Tokyo and then basically says that he is 100% wrong, and we're starting to feel like, yo, this is a mess, she's a drama queen, and again, look at Simon's face. And our final moment comes when AZUMA confesses to Tokyo about his feelings for Ellie, and that was something I didn't even see coming. I had the same look on my face as Tokyo. And if there was any girl who I felt would get in between them, I for sure thought it was going to be Palma. And I say all that to say that this is what makes the characters feel alive, and it just shows that Ishida has a thorough intention in the overall work. You can tell that there's a psychological presence within the characters that influences their responses, as well as the way we as readers expect them to respond. It's almost as if Ishida writes the story in collaboration with his characters. And we as Choujin X fans are able to be in sync with the mood, as well as read the room for each scene, because the characters are so human. This series is literally called Superhuman X, yet Ishida has crafted characters that are nearly mortal. I used the words awareness and intention earlier because without a doubt, Ishida has a general idea of which emotions certain moments will bring out of his readers, and he uses that as a tool. For example, remember in chapter 33 part 1, after our main three has been kidnapped by Batista, they reunite in the Tower of Mourning. And remember how we all felt when AZUMA first sees Tokyo? We thought, here we go again, berserk mode, he's going to kill everybody. Yet, it was just a plot to kill Batista. He does just cut off his arm and they are trapped, and then, you know, the vision and everything. But, like I said, awareness. Now, as for my star for this chapter, I gotta give it to AZUMA, and I think personally I'm elevating him from side character to the secondary character or co-main character, right? because I am starting to realize that his story is so much tied to Tokyo's, and looking back at older chapters, I realized that we've been given his story all along. As Choujin X goes on, so does the tale of AZUMA, right? And this chapter makes it more obvious when we are given the separate ideologies between Tokyo and AZUMA, where on one hand we have a belief of whatever happens, happens, but we must make a choice, and on the other, a cautious and calculated approach towards making the right decision. Now, on a surface level, it seems as if Tokyo's way is more naive or careless in comparison to AZUMA's analytical approach, but in reality, it is exactly what has allowed Tokyo to surpass AZUMA. During their fight, we see the internal dialogue from AZUMA where he credits his frustration to Tokyo's success as a Choujin, Tokyo's courage to drop out of school, in which AZUMA lacked, and Tokyo's growth, as well as the fact that AZUMA is no longer stronger of the two. The issue with AZUMA's ideology is that when you are obsessed over making the right decision, you oftentimes miss out on the opportunity to actually make a choice. And on top of that, AZUMA's fear of being wrong also cripples him from making decisions in general. On the other hand, we have Tokyo, who has matured not because he is stronger or because he has become brave, but because he understands and accepts the possibility of failing. And this liberates Tokyo. The most beautiful moment of this chapter is when AZUMA says, "Sandek taught me self-control." To me, this was an amazing display of the complexity of AZUMA because he does not yet realize that he has not grown at all, and the gap between he and Tokyo is way further than we thought. Sure, he has become more powerful, but as a character, AZUMA is still in chapter 1. First of all, you can't say Sandek taught me self-control and then start throwing hands with your best friend. And second, AZUMA more so tries to control outside situations more so than himself, whereas Tokyo understands that he can only control himself while outside situations unfold the way they do. This just goes to show that Tokyo is free from his birdcage while AZUMA is still trapped under a rock. Which, by the way, not only is AZUMA failing Sandek's lesson, but he also got the whole roly-poly thing wrong. But that is just good writing because when we are first introduced to AZUMA, he is the golden boy with the good grades. He knows how to fight, does karate and all that. So we give him the benefit of the doubt when it comes to random facts or general knowledge. However, AZUMA leads you to believe that roly-polies do not like being in damp environments when in actuality that is where they thrive. So my guess is that he was projecting his own feelings of being stuck to that of a roly-poly living under a rock, as opposed to being out free in dry environments. Now, once again, Soy Ishida has delivered. As far as AZUMA and Tokyo goes, I just think matters got worse. I know they ended all buddy-buddy, but that final dialogue still shows that AZUMA is looking not necessarily over his shoulders, but more so ahead of him, behind Tokyo's back, right? And my guess for future chapters, I think we're gonna return to that whole train track scene with his father. I think that was just a glimpse of a memory that we saw. There's probably something way deeper than what we got a hint of. I gotta see what else is happening between his father and AZUMA. Something tells me he is the polar opposite of Tokyo's dad, which we seen was a GOAT moment back in, I don't know what chapter that was, but he gave him that band and was like, go ahead, drop out of school. I used to try to be a hippie, but there we go, man. Chapter 43. I'll see y'all. You think 43.1 or are we doing 44? Who knows? I don't know. But peace, thank you, take care.